Welcome here, folks. I conferred with Cheryl, and she reminded me that our rules about brown bag lunch are we start at 12, whoever's here, and we end at 12:30, whoever's leaving or has left. So, a very warm welcome to all of you, those of you who are regularly in this building, and a few of you who are regularly not in this building. Thanks for joining us. And a particularly warm welcome to Brother Don Peters on his last swing through Ontario as the Executive Director of MCC Canada. So Don, we're going to give you about 22 minutes, and then I'll start putting up fingers that show you how many minutes you have left, because we want to make sure you can have as much time as you want for question and answers.
You want to have people here, right?
Not necessarily. You know, loyal people like Dan, they'll stick around. But because we have a few minutes of the time that we want, while these folks are here, to say thank you to you. So don't use all your time talking.
Okay.
Welcome.
And also give me more warning than the 22. Like don't tell me when I'm done. Tell me when. Yeah, okay, all right. Folks, it's very, very, very good for me to be here with you today. Thank you for arranging this, and thank you for coming. I don't know if I got 22 minutes or 15, but let me just say a few things. It's an honor and it's a pleasure. I've kind of organized my thoughts around a few ideas, and they were connected, at least in my mind, and hopefully some of it will connect with you. I see Ron Matthews is here, and Ron actually configures into some of this story in a nice way, Ron. So here we are. I'm going to start with, there are many dates that I could name within the time period from when I started with MCC to now. But I've landed on 4, and let me just say a word about each of them. The first was September the 4th, 2001. That's the day that I started. I think that it was the Tuesday after Labor Day. My first day on the job. Exactly a week later was September the 11th, 2001. And you remember likely where you were on that day. And I remember driving across the Bishop Grandin Bridge on my way to the office. I could see it on the right side. And I heard an announcement on CBC radio saying that an airplane had crashed into one of the trade towers in New York City. And I thought, why on earth wouldn't the air traffic controllers keep airplanes away from that part of the city? I got to the office, settled in my cubicle at that time, and within, I don't know, maybe it was certainly within the hour, if not less time, Rick Fast, who was our director of communications, came to me and said, Don, a second airplane has hit the tower. And that changed everything. And I really do think that the world we see today is a different world than it was prior to that. That Sunday, I had a preaching assignment arranged long before, and unrelated to MCC, preaching assignment in my own church. I called the church and said, because the church is very deliberate about putting stuff together so that the sermon works with the music and stuff. So this was about Wednesday, and I called the church and said, we have to start again. Well, the music's in place, and I said, well, things have changed. I've ripped up my script. I was at that time reading a book called The Map of the World. I've forgotten the author's name, but in this book, it was the story of a woman who loved to study maps. And she did so one day at her place on the farm while children under her care were playing outside, and one of them drowned in the pond. And the map of her world changed that day. And I used that image to talk about the map of our world and how it has changed. And I remember that week Ron Matthews called, I don't know what we called it then, but key leadership within MCC to talk about how the map of the world had changed and what that meant for MCC. And I don't know that we would have been able to. In fact, we couldn't have anticipated where we have come to now. But the architecture of where we are now was first written back then in 2001. That's one date, very memorable date. December the 26th, 2004. And at that time, I think that Ron was still in position as Executive Director of Binational. This was Boxing Day, and the tsunami hit at that time the coast of Indonesia, and then later the coast of India and points further west. I remember getting the call from Willie Reimer, who was our disaster response person in one of our departments. And I recall the exhausting hours weekly where all of us across this entire MCC system, in the provinces, in MCC Canada, in the regions, in MCC Binational, and all over the place. The extra hours, the exhausting hours of those weeks and even those months. And I remember never feeling more part of a team than at that time. I remember being at the office on New Year's Eve and coming to a gathering of friends when we finally at the office shut down for the night. I remember telling Willie Reimer, I've never felt so exhausted and never felt so alive. There have been many disasters since that MCC has responded to, and even now today, but nothing that has captured the attention of the wider constituency over such a short period of time. Why was it? I think it was in part because it was Christmas, because we were connecting with family at that very moment, because it was a disaster of natural dimension, not human caused. Anyway, it was a combination that created a moment to remember in the history of MCC. A third date, March the 31st, 2012, and I've written here for myself the serving bowls. If you've been part of MCC, you know that on that day, March the 31st, 2012, the wineskins process came to an end. And we had a ceremony at the Mennonite Church in Akron, Pennsylvania, which was a very, very moving ceremony where Arlie Clausen, who was then Executive Director of MCC, what we called MCC Binational, on behalf of MCC, entrusted the responsibility of our shared program to Ron Byler, who was representing MCC US, and Don Peters, who was representing MCC Canada. It was a very moving moment, and I'm saying that to myself so I don't start cracking up here. But this is what happened, and this is what I remember in that ceremony. And I still have this bowl in my office, which Rick, you will inherit. They gave me a serving bowl, and Ron a serving bowl. A 10,000 villages item, which came from I'm not sure where. And we were to hold it out. We were to take, each of us were to take the serving bowl. And there was a cloth for it, a batik that came from one of the countries that villages relates to. And there was a prayer for MCC, for our leadership, that we would be one. And I deliberately held the bowl like this, not like this, so that I could support it with my body. I held it straight to sense its heaviness. And the prayer seemed to go on and on and on. And I thought, no, I decided to hold it this way. And I'm glad that I did, to experience its weight. A very significant moment. And then my fourth one, March the 18th, 2017, just a few months ago. This was in Akron, when after 5 years of this model, where MCC Canada and MCC US have agreed to join together to share this international program as two parties would share an undivided full ownership of a single house. On this day, just 3 months ago, the two boards not only reviewed the covenant that we have together, but renewed it. Put a stake into the ground to say, this is yet another commitment of these two bodies to each other to serve in the name of Christ. So 4 significant dates. There are many others, but those are the ones that have come to me at this point. A key concept, which I just want to repeat, that MCC's international program is a shared program. Rick and I were talking about this today in terms of lines of responsibility and so on. And I said, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Colombia is in the administrative line of MCC Canada. Ron Byler took his board to have a meeting in Colombia. Why? Because it's a shared program. I am as interested in what's going on in Honduras as I am in Haiti, as I am in India. And it doesn't even matter to sort those things out for me as to which is in the MCC Canada line and other. We have responsibility for this house together. Ron Byler and I do not tire of telling us this story. When the announcement of my transition to my next phase of life came out a few months ago, Ron Matthews, who's here, and I hope he doesn't mind me quoting him, sent me a kind note. He wrote, "When I left MCC over 11 years ago, I recall that the 2 most frequently asked questions and my stock answers were these. 1, how long does it take to feel out of the loop?" And Ron answered, about 24 hours. 2, do you miss your earlier role? Ron answered, I miss the people, colleagues, partners, constituents, and others, and the issues immensely, but I don't miss the responsibilities. I couldn't agree more in anticipation of this. There are some faces that I will carry with me as long as I live, and I want to show you, if I can manage this, I want to show you 4. Can you give me some signal on time here so I just know? I got to make sure I know how this works. Okay, here we are. I can get carried away with these pictures, so I'll try to be short. And some of you have seen these before. This picture was taken in, I think it was March of 2013. The setting is in the city of Tyre, close to the Mediterranean Sea in the southern part of Lebanon. And I have the privilege as a white North American, middle-aged, or you would say older, male, sitting in a circle of about 12 women, other than the partner male who I'm with. 12 women who are Syrian refugees, and they have temporarily settled, at least they thought, in Lebanon at that time. And we're about to finish our gathering. And you might even be able to see on my body language that I'm almost getting ready to get up and leave. I'm not calling the shots of this meeting, but the meeting is, we're finished. It's the natural time to leave. This woman in the purple headdress, if you see her left hand, she's supporting her weight already on the table. She's trying to get the person to my left, she's trying to get his attention. And when she's able to break into the conversation, she reaches her left hand further over the table so she can get closer to me. And she leans to me and with her right hand points to her eyes, which were strikingly blue. And she says, "Don't forget me. Don't forget me." All of this in translation, so it takes a bit of time. I will never, ever forget that face. When I walked out of that patio, and they've reflected on this scene over the years, that woman wasn't saying, "Don't forget me, these particular eyes, this face." She was saying, "Don't forget this face because it typifies people like me who are people like you who have need now." That's what she was saying. And she also wasn't saying, you, Don Peters, whoever you are, you, please don't forget me. She was saying, you, whom I don't know, but you have some ability and position to speak to others. You don't forget me. You take my message to others. And I hope that in MCC we have done that over the years, and I know that you've done it. This second picture is more recent. It comes from last year and about May, I think, April. I was on my way to Honduras, and I was on my way to the area meeting of the Latin America Caribbean team leaders of our shared program. And when I travel, I always want to go see the countryside and see the work that MCC is doing. And Michael Chapman, who was country representative in Honduras at the time, had me accompany him and his family by car, by truck actually, from Guatemala into Honduras. We got close to the Honduran border, and we went up to see a partner, and the climb up was very, very steep. And as we rose in altitude, it got more and more arid until it was a virtual desert on top. The corn had been planted, the seedlings had come up. This is almost New Testament in imagery, and then they had died because the rains didn't come. MCC was there in a small disaster, responding to the needs of a group of 30 women and this organization that they had created, and we were doing water retention work. At any rate, I'm going to show you the next slide here. These 4 women were leaders of the group who had met us. This isn't a very good picture. Can I go back to the other one? At one point, these women said to me, do you want to see where we get our drinking water from? And I said, well, it's probably there, because there was a big water tank right beside us. And she said, well, we would, but it's been so dry that the water doesn't have enough pressure to come and fill this tank. So we walked down the hill to get our water. Do you want to see? And I said, yes. So they took me there along with others. And here was this young girl sitting beside the water hole. The women would get up at 4:30 in the morning so they would have safety and company and go to the water hole to get their water for the day, their drinking water. That little red bowl in the water marks that girl's family's place in line. And the water literally seeped out of the rock. It didn't flow into this pool. It seeped out of the rock. And when there was enough, she would scoop the water up, put it into her gourd, and walk home with it. Do you want to know where we get our water? Anyway, we went back to the canopy where we were speaking. Whoops, I got it. Whoa! I want to get to this other picture here. Sorry. The women. Yeah. You know how it is sometimes when you're in leadership and you visit and you're new. People in that setting, when they hear that you're executive director, or they make assumptions. And they think that if they ask you something, well, you will do it immediately. And so it happened here that one of these women, I think the woman in the lighter pink, made a comment of me, which Michael Chapman translated. She said, I hope that he can see we have nothing here. That thought will remain with me for a long time. MCC was there providing a means by which these folks could collect and harvest the water that came to them, often violently, and then would run down the hill, and is making a difference in the people's lives. My third picture, I think, comes from Ethiopia, and last November. MCC was in a community where we capped an artesian well. We arrived to see this work, very interesting project. And it wasn't just development work, it was peace work, because there were rival tribal groups in the area which shared the artesian well. But the camels would come and the donkeys would come, and the well area would get mucked up. And so the community decided if we could cap the water and lead a spout of water or a spigot of water, a canister of water to a drinking place for the cattle, we could keep the area pure for drinking water for humans. So we did this, marvelous work. It was about dinner time and it was very hot, and we'd walk probably for 45 minutes to get there, and now we needed to walk back, and the plan was to go to the vehicles and go into a town nearby, and hopefully we'd find a restaurant with something to eat. But as we walked up the hill, a young man, probably about 30 to 35, came to us and said, "You must be hungry and thirsty, come to our house to eat and to drink." So we did. We got into the house, and they had cleared everything in the house and put fresh straw on the floor. And they served us injera. But they said they were fasting and they wouldn't eat, or they couldn't eat, but they wanted to have us enjoy their food, and we did. And then this woman, my picture's not a very good one, and someone needs to Photoshop the red out of the eyes and stuff, but this woman who's on the far right, she said in the course of our conversation, she said, "I never would have dreamt that in my lifetime we would have water like this." And the water like this that she has is water that she needs to, with her donkey or without, walk for about 30 minutes to retrieve a clean water from a clean, whatever it is, tap, and then 30 minutes back to her house. MCC made a very big difference in those people's lives. On the same trip in Ethiopia, we were viewing some of our work, MCC's work, in conservation agriculture. An exciting project that we're doing in conjunction with Canadian Food Grains Bank. How are we doing for time here? Anyway, this woman, a proud evangelist for conservation agriculture, she holds in her hands 2 soils from the same plot of land or near the same plot of land. One, on her right hand, she has soil that has been part of the conservation ag, the covering of the soil, the mulching and all this stuff. And the other is the regular soil. And she says, with pride, she looks at her right hand, squeezes the soil and says, "I have fattened my soil." It's a wonderful image. Well, these aren't the only images. There are colleagues here in Ontario and across this country, colleagues in our shared program. And I could name people, particularly Ron Byler, with whom I've lived this role. And there are particular faces within MCC, faces within the MCC United States management team, the Canada management team, Rick Kober-Bauman here, and the team of MCC Ontario. And then there are the faces that are not so particular, but they're part of the crowd of witnesses that makes up MCC. I was in southern Lebanon in March of 2013 in the same city of, I think this was Tyre, and I was sitting in a different group of women who were telling me about their refugee status and all of what it meant. And they were sharing their stories, and our host partner was telling us of material aid, a shipment that had come from MCC just recently. And a woman on my immediate right tapped me on the knee. We didn't have language to communicate with each other, but we were talking about material aid and blankets. And the woman on my immediate right tapped me on the knee, and she looked at me, smiled, and she did this. Do you get it? She was tying the knots of the trademark MCC quilt. And so those aren't the particular faces, but think of the people even in this building, maybe today, and around this country and across the United States, who are working at comforters and giving these things to other people. Think of the people in the thrift network, in the relief sale network. Last year I was in Ethiopia in November. I sat with a leader of the Mizoritis Christus Church who told me that he'd always had the perception of MCC as being that big organization in North America with multiple resources of dollars and personnel. And then he visited North America, went to Akron. They took him to a thrift store, thrift shop, a material resource center, the MRC, as we call it there, and they took him to a relief sale. And he saw hundreds of volunteers who put the resources of MCC together. $1 against another, $5 against 20. And that changed his perception of what MCC is. It's this cloud of witnesses. And that, for me, is the most humbling thing, to go to people within the government of Canada and represent MCC and stand there knowing there are thousands of people behind who are in support. I remember my end-of-term report back in 1993, when Elaine and I finished our MCC term as co-representatives in Brazil. I wrote something to the effect in this end-of-term report that I hoped that I would be able to find work with committed people working toward just causes. I am humbled and privileged to have found that calling in MCC. Thank you, friends, in MCC Ontario. I will never forget you. I should take a picture to put it on with all of those. So thank you very much. Now, Rick, I assume I may have taken the time. I have no idea where we are. So if there are questions and stuff.
Yeah. We have time.
Yeah, I don't know what we got.
No one's rushing for the door, then.
Okay.
Any thoughts, reflections, memories, contradictions?
I said to Rick this morning, so you have your shirt untucked?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a question, but like it may be,
Hey, come on over here.
like, and then you see Ron Matthews, former executive director, and look, he's wearing new soccer clothes.
Can you stand up, Ron? And then in our presence, what does Irv Weens do? But he stands up and hauls his shirt out, but he tucks it back in again. Don, there are lots of people here who could add their thanks and maybe will as we wrap up. So part of my thanks is for what you've just done in the last 23 minutes.
23, huh?
Approximately. Because some of those things I was there for, and I have my own memory, or in some cases, you know, I've heard you tell a story like the ones you shared now. But it was a good reminder for me of the vision that you've cast and the modeling that you've done. And you said something to me just this morning about international travel, and the reason you do it is in part because it moves you, because it changes you, and that's deeply important in the role that you've shared. So thank you for the 16 years, and then for giving us some glimpses into that in these last few minutes.
Thank you.
So. Now, I do need a few minutes to give you your gift, because everything, you know, it's like.
Takes time.
Yeah, takes time. So this is trademarked Ontario. We don't do books or cards anymore. We do blessing jars.
Huh?
So you can take this mason jar. Somebody did some canning in October of 2006, apparently. But more recently, people here in this office have had an opportunity to stop by Darlene's desk and write a blessing or a thank you or some best wishes. And that's for you to carry with you. It probably has to go in your checked baggage. And then we know that you have some grandchildren.
I do.
And that I was listening carefully when we were talking to someone yesterday, so I'm hoping that this might fit the little one named Inez,
Yes, it will.
who's in Winnipeg with you, right?
She'll have to fatten out a bit. But
Oh, she will. Well, I might have something for that, too.
no.
So, take that to
Thanks very
Inez. Now, this one's for you.
Beautiful.
And
That's bad.
we only give these to people who are willing to wear them now. So that one you have to put on now. You really should take off that nice striped shirt, but
I think I'll just put it over.
fair enough.
If they're televising this thing.
Yeah, this is, who knows who's watching you, Don?
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe your wife.
Yeah,
Did we leave enough room for the pipes there?
yeah, well, I'm not like Greg Boyd. I forgot what it said.
This is how Mennonites bear arms.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I should have taken my shirt off.
you should have, I know. So Louise gets lots of credit for this. My dear spouse is here. So Don fancies himself to be a pretty pious guy. And he often reminds me and others of his relatively greater piety than the rest of us. And there are certain things.
It's MB too.
I wasn't going to say it that way, Don. It has to do with things that he drinks and doesn't drink. So if you've noticed him being around here these last few days, never comes to the coffee machine, always has his glass of water. And I know that you have some doubts about some of the rest of us and our, levels of piety. But here you are in Ontario, and I wanted you to have some of our finest for you to take with you.
Water, I'm sure.
And so Louise took some time to get this for you yesterday, and we wanted to present it to you this morning.
Wonderful.
And you should open it.
May I open it? Yes. Oh, my goodness me. Look at this, folks. Now, wouldn't that be nice if you had a beer with that?
When Dawn stays with us, I don't know how many times I've heard you talk about summer sausage with your colleagues, so you had to have a stubby of your own to pick on.
Well, he makes it, for goodness sake, so that's great.
And this,
But how am I going to get this on the flight?
well, maybe you'll have to share it before you go.
Yeah.
And this is something new from MCC Ontario as well, that just has to go with you now that you have a stubby of summer sausage. Your own summer sausage cutting board. So again, Don, thank you for your
Thank you.
good mentorship and leadership, and yeah, enjoy your summer sausage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I also want to say that when the board appointed this gentleman as Executive Director of MCC Canada, I called him. And the first thing I said to him was, have you heard who the board has appointed as ED? And after we talked a little bit, I said to him, Rick, when I leave here on September the 30th, I'll be able to go with peace. And I said, that's the biggest compliment I can give you. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.